I'm Natalie Reynolds, 34 years old, and nothing could have prepared me for that Christmas Eve morning. The silence woke me first, an eerie, complete absence of the usual family chaos. Room by room, my panic grew as I searched our empty house, calling names that echoed back unanswered. In the kitchen, a note awaited in my husband James's handwriting. "We needed this. Don't try to find us." 13 years of marriage, 2 children, I'd sacrificed everything for, all summarized in that cold sentence. My perfect family had vanished overnight, leaving only betrayal in their wake. Before I tell you how my heart shattered that Christmas Eve, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the painful truth that sometimes blood isn't thicker than water. From the outside, we were the definition of an American success story. I had worked my way up to marketing executive at one of Boston's most prestigious firms, fighting through countless late nights and sacrificed weekends to secure our comfortable lifestyle. James held a demanding position as a senior software engineer at a tech startup, bringing home an impressive salary that complemented mine. Our children were equally accomplished. Emma, at 14, was already taking advanced placement classes with aspirations for an Ivy League future, while Tyler, at 12, had established himself as a star athlete with natural leadership abilities that made him popular among his peers. Just a week before Christmas, we had gathered for what I now realize was our last normal family dinner. The tension was subtle but unmistakable as I made my announcement. "I have some bad news," I said, placing my fork down beside my barely touched salmon. "Johnson's account needs emergency revisions before the holiday, and I'm the only one who can handle it. I'll need to work late on Christmas Eve." James's expression flickered briefly before settling into practiced understanding. "How late are we talking?" "I should be home by 7-8 at the latest," I promised, though we both knew my time estimates for work were notoriously optimistic. Emma pushed her vegetables around her plate. "But what about our traditional Christmas Eve movie marathon?" "We can start when Mom gets home," James offered, though his voice lacked conviction. Tyler, always more direct than his sister, simply asked, "Why is it always your job that has emergencies during holidays?" The question stung because it contained a truth I wasn't ready to acknowledge. "It's just the nature of marketing, buddy. Year-end is crucial for clients." I reached for his hand, but he pulled away slightly, a small rejection that I ignored at the time. The conversation moved on, but looking back, I should have noticed how quickly they accepted my absence, as if they'd already made peace with it or plans around it. What none of them saw was the weight I carried daily. The mental load of managing our household fell squarely on my shoulders despite my demanding career. I maintained our social calendar, coordinated the children's extracurricular activities, planned holidays, and managed finances, all while excelling professionally. For the past 3 months, I'd been taking on additional projects specifically to ensure my year-end bonus would be substantial enough to fund a luxury vacation I'd been promising the family for years. Sleep had become a luxury. I couldn't afford averaging 4 hours nightly as I juggled presentations and parent-teacher conferences. My personal time had evaporated completely, my once-beloved yoga class abandoned, friendships maintained through hasty text messages, my appearance simplified to the most efficient version possible. All sacrifices I made willingly, believing they were necessary investments in our family's happiness and security. There were signs of trouble that I was too exhausted to investigate. James had developed a habit of ending phone calls abruptly when I entered the room, dismissing my questions with vague references to work stuff. Emma and Tyler had become unusually protective of their phones, angling screens away when I approached. Strange charges appeared on our credit card statements, small enough to avoid immediate concern, but unusual enough that I'd flagged them to investigate when I had time, a moment that never seemed to arrive. On December 23rd, I found myself alone at the office long after everyone else had left for holiday celebrations. The Johnson presentation still needed substantial revisions, and I was determined to complete it so I could fully engage in our Christmas festivities. I remembered my promise to Tyler that I'd watch his Christmas pageant video that evening, but as midnight approached, my heavy eyelids betrayed me. I fell asleep at my desk, presentation still open on my laptop, family photo, as my screensaver smiling back at me as my consciousness faded, the irony lost on me at the time. My last thought before drifting off was that I just needed to push through this final hurdle. Once the holidays arrived, I'd make it up to them with my undivided attention. I'd be fully present for Christmas Day, showering them with carefully selected gifts that proved I knew them deeply, despite my absences. I had no idea that by the time I woke, they would have already enacted their own plan, one that didn't include me at all. My alarm jolted me awake at 6:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve. Disoriented, I realized I'd made it home at some point and collapsed into bed still wearing yesterday's clothes. The house was unusually quiet, no shower running, no children arguing over bathroom time, no coffee brewing. For one peaceful moment, I savored the silence, assuming everyone was sleeping in for the holiday. James the First called out my voice, echoing through our bedroom. When no response came, I reached across to his side of the bed. The sheets were cold and undisturbed. A strange uneasiness crept over me as I slipped into the hallway. Emma, Tyler, I called, knocking gently on each of their doors before pushing them open. Empty beds greeted me, still made from the previous morning. "Hello, anyone home?" My voice grew louder, more insistent as I moved through our house. The Christmas tree stood in the living room, presents arranged beneath it, the ones I had wrapped late into the night earlier that week. Everything looked normal except for the conspicuous absence of my family. I checked the garage. James's Audi was gone. Back upstairs, I flung open our closet doors to find his suitcase missing. In the children's rooms, I noticed gaps in their closets too. Favorite outfits gone, drawers left partially open. Emma's cherished laptop was absent from her desk. Tyler's prized gaming console no longer connected to his television. My hands trembled as I checked our bedroom safe, already knowing what I would find. James's passport was gone. So were the children's, which we normally kept together for safekeeping. Panic rising in my throat, I raced downstairs to the kitchen, hoping to find some explanation. That's when I saw it, a note written on our holiday stationery, the cheery reindeer border creating a jarring contrast to the message inside. "We needed this break. Don't try to find us. We'll be back after New Year's. The kids are fine." No love, no signature, not even our names. Just clinical information delivered with surgical precision to cut me out of their holiday plans. My knees buckled as I collapsed onto our kitchen floor, the cold tile pressing against my cheek as I curled into myself. Waves of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak crashed over me in rapid succession. How could they do this? Where had they gone? Why didn't they tell me? With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed James's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Emma next, then Tyler. Same result for both, not even the courtesy of a ring before rejection. They had silenced me, literally and figuratively. I stumbled to our family calendar hanging on the refrigerator, no trip marked, no absences noted. Opening my laptop, I checked our shared family email account and found a message sent 3 days ago from James to Emma's teacher. Emma will be absent due to a family emergency until after the new year. The deception had been planned and executed with methodical care. A horrible thought struck me, sending me scrambling to check our joint bank account online. The balance was significantly lower than it should have been. Scrolling through recent transactions, I discovered a pattern: $500 withdrawn every few days over the past month, adding up to nearly $15,000. Small enough amounts to avoid triggering my immediate attention, but substantial in total. They had been planning this for weeks, maybe months, slowly gathering resources for their escape, while I remained oblivious, drowning in work and to-do lists. The house that had felt unnaturally quiet now seemed to echo with accusation. Every Christmas decoration we had put up together now mocked me. The stockings hanging on the fireplace, including mine, maintained for appearances, felt like the final cruel joke. I had been planning to fill them that very evening after returning from work, imagining the children's excitement on Christmas morning. Instead, I stood alone in our festive home, abandoned on Christmas Eve, trying to comprehend how my family could have orchestrated such a complete betrayal. The carefully wrapped presents under the tree represented hours I'd spent researching their wishes, shopping during lunch breaks, and wrapping late into the night, tangible proof of my love that they had deemed insufficient. I picked up the note again, reading it over and over, searching for some hidden meaning, some clue I'd missed. The handwriting was undeniably, James's the message, undeniably clear. They had left me behind deliberately and completely, turning what should have been our family's most connected time of year into my most profound isolation. Number. Part 4. Desperate Search for Answers. Once the initial shock began to subside, I launched into action mode, the same approach I applied to workplace crises. I needed information, and I needed it now. I began systematically calling friends and family who might know something about my family's disappearance. No one answered. Of course, it was Christmas Eve morning, and normal families were likely sleeping in or beginning their holiday traditions. Each call to voicemail increased my frustration and deepened my suspicion. Had everyone known, was I the only one kept in the dark about my own family's plans? By mid-morning, desperation drove me to call James's workplace despite the holiday. After several transfers, I reached his department's administrative assistant, who happened to be finishing year-end tasks. "Oh, Natalie," she said, her voice tinged with unmistakable awkwardness. "I thought you'd be gone by now, too." James submitted his vacation request weeks ago through New Year's. He mentioned a special family trip. The confirmation that his own colleagues knew more about my family's plans than I did sent a fresh wave of humiliation washing over me. "I see" was all I could manage before hanging up. Back at my laptop, I began searching through our home computer's browser history. James had cleared it recently, but with my technical knowledge from work, I was able to recover fragments of deleted searches. Multiple queries for luxury resorts in Bali appeared along with research on activities suitable for teenagers. Following this lead, I accessed James's personal email account. We had shared passwords early in our marriage, though I rarely used his, and found a confirmation for a beachfront villa booking in Bali, sent to his personal rather than our shared email. My heart pounding, I returned to Emma's room. Years ago, we had established a no closed doors policy in our house, but I had always respected my children's privacy within reason. Now, that seemed like another mistake in a long list of parental failures. Under Emma's mattress, I found her diary, something I'd never previously invaded, and with shaking hands opened to recent entries. December 15th, Dad finalized the Bali plans today. "I can't believe we're actually doing this. I feel bad about leaving Mom behind, but Dad says she needs to understand what it feels like when someone you love isn't there for important moments. Mom's been too busy to notice anything anyway. She probably won't even realize we're gone until days later." The words stabbed me like physical blows. My own daughter, my firstborn, believed I wouldn't notice their absence. Worse, she resented me enough to participate in this scheme. My phone rang. Rachel, my best friend since college, finally returning my call. "Rachel, thank God," I breathed. "My family is gone. They left for Bali without telling me." "Did you know about this?" The pause before her answer told me everything. "Natalie," she finally said, her voice gentle but firm. "Yes, James told me about their plans last week. And you didn't think to warn me." My voice rose sharply. "He asked me not to. They thought you needed to understand what it feels like to be left behind." Her words echoed Emma's diary entry with sickening precision. "You've been absent for months, Natalie. Not physically maybe, but in every other way." "That's not fair," I shouted, my composure shattering completely. "Everything I do is for them. Every late night, every missed dinner, it's all so they can have the life they deserve." "But that's not what they want," Rachel countered. "They want you present, engaged, actually there. When was the last time you attended one of Tyler's games without checking email? When did you last have a conversation with Emma that wasn't about schedules or achievements?" "So this is the solution," I was screaming, now tears streaming down my face. "Abandoning me on Christmas Eve, humiliating me, making me look like such a terrible mother that even my best friend sides with them." "No one's siding with anyone," Rachel sighed. "What they did was extreme, I agree, but they felt desperate. Maybe this will make you see what matters." I hung up without saying goodbye, throwing my phone across the room where it bounced harmlessly on the sofa. Collapsing onto the floor, I gave myself over to wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. On Christmas Eve, I found myself completely alone, betrayed not just by my family, but apparently by every person in my support network. All of them had conspired in this lesson they collectively decided I needed to learn. After hours of alternating between rage and despair, a strange calm descended over me, the kind that comes when emotions have been so intense that the body simply can no longer sustain them. With this artificial clarity, I decided to look deeper. If everyone believed I deserved this treatment, perhaps there were truths I had been avoiding. I went to James's nightstand, opening the drawer he always kept neatly organized. Behind his reading glasses and chargers lay a leather-bound journal I'd given him 3 years ago, encouraging him to record his thoughts as a stress management technique. I'd forgotten about it entirely until this moment. Settling onto our bed, I began to read entries from the past 6 months, watching our family's dissolution documented in my husband's careful handwriting. May 17, Natalie missed Tyler's championship game today. Third one this season. Had to watch my son scan the stands when he scored the winning goal, see his face fall when he realized his mother wasn't there again. Made the usual excuses about an emergency client meeting. Tyler just nodded, he stopped arguing about it. That might be worse than his disappointment. June 22, Emma won first place at the state science fair today. Natalie had promised to attend but texted an hour before that Johnson needed urgent revisions to their campaign. Emma pretended it didn't matter, but I found her crying in her room tonight. When I suggested calling Natalie to share the news, Emma said, "What's the point? She'll just say congratulations and ask if I've started my summer reading." When did my wife become so predictable in her absence? August 3. Sometimes I feel like a single parent. Natalie physically lives here, but her mind never leaves the office. At dinner tonight, she nodded and smiled at all the right moments while the kids talked, but when I asked her later what Tyler had said about his new coach, she couldn't remember. She wasn't listening at all. September 15, suggested counseling again. Natalie said, "We don't need therapy, we need understanding of her demanding career phase." Said once she makes partner, things will calm down. That's the same promise from 2 promotions ago. The entries continued, each one a documentation of my gradual disappearance from family life. What struck me hardest was the entry from October, when James had apparently reached his breaking point. October 28, Natalie promised the kids a Christmas trip again tonight. 3rd year she's dangled this particular carrot. 1st year, the kids were so excited they started packing a month early. 2nd year, they asked questions but still believed. This year, they just exchanged looks across the table. They know it won't happen. I can't keep watching their hopes get crushed. Something has to change. December 10 made the decision today. Booked the tickets to Bali. The kids are nervous about leaving without telling Natalie, but also excited about actually taking the vacation they've been promised for years. Emma said something that broke my heart. "At least on this trip, we'll have one parent fully there with us." When did our children start expecting partial presence as the norm? I set the journal aside, my hands trembling. Moving to our home office, I opened my personal email account, not my work email that I checked obsessively, but my personal inbox that had become so neglected I couldn't remember the last time I'd logged in. Hundreds of unread messages awaited me. Scrolling through, I found multiple meeting invitations from Tyler's coach and Emma's teachers that I'd never responded to. Calendar notifications for school events and games I'd missed. Most devastating were the series of emails from James over the months, subject lines growing increasingly urgent. "Can we talk about summer plans?" "Important. Please read when you can." "Need to discuss our marriage." "Last attempt. Please respond." The final email sent 2 weeks ago contained only one line. "I don't think you'll read this either, but I want you to know we're running out of options." I had missed all of them, too focused on my professional inbox to notice my personal life disintegrating. Opening our digital photo album, I scrolled through pictures from last Christmas, the 4 of us in matching pajamas, building gingerbread houses, watching holiday movies under a shared blanket. My smile in those photos reached my eyes, my posture relaxed as I leaned into my family rather than toward my ever-present laptop. Continuing through the chronological photos, I watched myself gradually disappear. By spring, I appeared in fewer family moments. Summer vacation showed mostly James, with the children, my presence limited to occasional group photos where I stood slightly apart, often checking my phone. By fall, I was almost entirely absent from family documentation, either physically not present or emotionally disconnected when I was included. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. While I still believed their lesson was cruelly delivered, I could no longer pretend I hadn't played a significant role in creating our family crisis. My absence hadn't begun with their physical departure, it had started with my emotional withdrawal months or even years earlier. As evening fell on Christmas Eve, I found myself sitting in the dark living room surrounded by wrapped presents that suddenly seemed like poor substitutes for what my family actually wanted from me. I poured myself a glass of wine, turning on a Christmas movie we traditionally watched together. As the familiar scenes played out depicting family togetherness and holiday magic, I allowed myself to fully feel the devastating loneliness of having prioritized the wrong things for too long. The luxury vacation my family was currently enjoying without me wasn't really about the destination, it was about finally experiencing the connection and attention I had deprived them of. They had stopped waiting for me to provide it and had found it elsewhere in my absence rather than my presence. Just as I was contemplating opening a second bottle of wine, the doorbell rang, startling me from my misery. Through the peephole, I saw my sister Ashley standing on the porch, concern etched across her features. When I opened the door, she immediately pulled me into a fierce hug. "I just found out what they did," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I came as soon as I could." I stepped back, studying her face. "You didn't know." Ashley shook her head as she followed me inside. "Mom called me from her place in Florida an hour ago, bragging about James taking the kids to Bali for Christmas. When I asked about you, there was this awful pause, and then she admitted you weren't with them." I couldn't believe it. The validation of having at least one person recognize how cruel this lesson felt unleashed a fresh wave of tears. Ashley guided me to the couch, listening as I poured out everything I'd discovered throughout the day. "I get that I've been absent," I concluded, wiping my eyes. "But to exclude me from Christmas without a word, to let me wake up alone and confused, how is that supposed to make me want to be more present with people who could hurt me so deliberately?" Ashley sighed, tucking her legs beneath her on the couch. "It was extreme," she acknowledged. "But Nat, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think before you answer. When was the last time you were fully present with your family, not physically in the room, but mentally elsewhere, truly engaged without checking your phone or thinking about work?" I opened my mouth to respond, but realized I couldn't recall a specific recent example. "I've been watching this happen for years," Ashley continued gently. "Every family gathering, you're there but not there. James has covered for you so many times, making excuses when you miss events or leave early. The kids have stopped expecting you to show up emotionally or physically. But everything I do is for them," I protested, the familiar defense rising automatically. "The long hours, the stress, it's all to provide the life they deserve. But what they want is your presence, not your presence," Ashley countered. "Look around, Natalie. You have a beautiful home, nice cars, college funds, established, all the material security anyone could want. But your family is literally paying to be away from you at Christmas. That should tell you something about what they actually need." Her words struck with painful accuracy. I thought about how I defined providing for my family almost entirely in material terms. The promotions, the bonuses, the financial stability, these were my measurements of successful parenting and partnership. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that emotional provision was equally important. Ashley shared her own struggles finding balance in her marriage. "Remember last year when I was working those back-to-back cases, Mark and I almost separated. He told me he couldn't be married to my career anymore. It terrified me enough to make real changes, not just promises." "What did you do?" I asked, suddenly desperate for a roadmap out of this disaster. "First, therapy alone and together. Then I established actual boundaries with work, not just theoretical ones. Started saying no to non-essential projects. Most importantly, I recognized that my workaholism wasn't really about providing for my family, it was about my own insecurities and fear of failure." The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. My drive had always been fueled by a deep-seated fear of the financial instability I'd experienced in childhood, something I'd vowed my own children would never know. "I think we should call James," Ashley suggested. "Not to blame or argue, but to start a conversation." I shook my head vehemently. "I can't. Not yet." "Natalie," Ashley said firmly, "pride isn't going to fix this. Your family is in Bali right now experiencing Christmas without you. Is being right more important than beginning to repair this?" With tremendous reluctance, I nodded, and Ashley dialed James's number on her phone, putting it on speaker between us. After several rings, his voice came through wary, defensive. "Ashley, is everything okay?" "I'm with Natalie," she replied calmly. "I think you all need to talk." A heavy silence followed before James spoke again. "Natalie the first," he began, then stopped. "I didn't want it to come to this." "Then why did you let it?" My voice cracked with emotion. "How could you take our children and just leave me?" "Because nothing else was getting through to you," he said, frustration evident. "Do you know how many conversations we've had about this over the past year? How many times I've told you we're losing you to your job? You listen, you promise to change, and 2 days later everything's exactly the same." In the background, I could hear waves crashing and children laughing, my children enjoying their Christmas Eve on a beach halfway around the world while I sat in our cold, empty house. "Can I talk to Emma and Tyler?" I asked, suddenly desperate to hear their voices. "They're swimming right now," James replied, his tone softening slightly. And honestly, Natalie, I think they need this break. We all do. A break from me, I said flatly, the full weight of that reality sinking in. From the dynamic we've created, he corrected. This isn't just about punishing you. It's about us remembering what it feels like to have fun together without walking on eggshells around your work schedule and mood. The conversation deteriorated from there, my hurt feelings colliding with his years of accumulated resentment. How dare you humiliate me like this, I finally shouted. Do you have any idea what it felt like to wake up alone on Christmas Eve? To discover everyone in my life knew my family had abandoned me. This is exactly why we needed space, James responded, his voice tight with emotion. You can only see how this affects you, not what led to it. The call ended badly with James hanging up after I refused to acknowledge any justification for their actions. Ashley stayed watching me pace our living room in agitation. That didn't go well, she observed unnecessarily. He's made me the villain, I fumed. Like I'm some monster they needed to escape from. No one thinks you're a monster, Nat Ashley said quietly. But you have become someone your family doesn't recognize anymore. The sister I grew up with would never have missed her son's championship games or her daughter's science fair. As the night progressed, Ashley continued to push me toward uncomfortable truths, staying over in our guest room when it became too late for her to drive home. We talked into the early hours of Christmas morning, diving deeper than we had in years. Remember Dad, she asked as we shared the last of the wine? How he was never really home, even when he was physically there. Always thinking about work, checking his pager, missing our important moments. I nodded, the parallel unavoidable. I swore I'd never parent like that. And yet, here we are, Ashley said gently. You became what you promised to avoid because somewhere along the way you started believing the lie Dad did, that providing financially was the same as being present. In the darkness of Christmas Eve becoming Christmas morning, I finally allowed myself to recognize that my workaholic tendencies weren't the dedication to family I'd always justified them as they were a trauma response to childhood insecurity manifesting as an adult in ways that were now threatening to cost me everything I truly valued. Christmas morning dawned gray and lifeless, matching my emotional state. Ashley and I sat among the presents beneath the tree, the cheerful wrapping paper creating a jarring contrast to the heavy atmosphere. You should open them, she encouraged, handing me a gift labeled "To Mom from Emma." With trembling hands, I unwrapped the package to find a handmade photo album. On the cover, Emma had written, "Remember when you were here inside," were photographs from the past several years, all moments I had been present for, fully engaged with my family. The most recent photo was dated nearly 18 months ago. Tyler's gift was a handcrafted wooden box containing notes on small cards. Each one described a memory he treasured with me, alongside a blank card labeled, "Future Memories when you come back to us." My tears fell onto the cards as I realized how my son perceived me as someone who had left long before they physically departed for Bali. James's gift was perhaps the most painful, a pair of tickets to a weekend couples retreat, scheduled for February, purchased months ago, with hope I might now never be able to restore. They still love you, Ashley said softly. That's clear from these gifts. They love who I used to be, I corrected carefully, returning each present to its wrapping. After Ashley left to join her own family for Christmas dinner, I found myself drawn to my laptop. Opening it, I noticed a video file on the desktop that hadn't been there before, titled, "Simply for Mom." With a deep breath, I clicked play. Emma's face appeared, her expression serious beyond her 14 years. "Merry Christmas, Mom. We're recording this before we leave. I know you'll be angry when you find out about our trip, but we needed to do something dramatic to reach you." The camera panned to include Tyler and James, all seated on our living room sofa, the same one I now sat on alone. "We miss the old you, Emma," continued her voice catching. "The one who used to build blanket forts and stay up late telling stories. The one who knew all our friends' names and remembered to ask about things that mattered to us." Tyler leaned forward, his young face earnest. "Can you please come back to us, Mom? The real you, not the one who's always tired and checking her phone." James said nothing at first, just placed his hands on the children's shoulders in silent support. Finally, he looked directly into the camera. "We love you, Natalie. This isn't about punishment, it's about shocking you into seeing what we've been trying to tell you for years. We're losing you, and we don't know how to get you back." The video ended with all three of them wishing me Merry Christmas, their faces reflecting a complex mixture of love, hurt, and hope that broke something open inside me. I collapsed into gut-wrenching sobs that felt like they came from the very core of my being, not the self-pitying tears of yesterday but a profound grief for what I had allowed myself to become. Ashley returned that evening to check on me, finding me surrounded by family photos spread across the living room floor. Together, we traced the timeline of my gradual disappearance from family life. It started after my promotion to senior executive 3 years ago. I realized, noting the visible shift in family dynamics captured in the photographs. The demands increased exponentially, and instead of establishing boundaries, I just kept stretching myself thinner. "You've always been an all-or-nothing person," Ashley observed. "Remember in high school when you stayed up for 3 days straight to perfect that history project?" I nodded, recognizing the pattern. I transferred that intensity to motherhood at first. I was super mom involved in everything. Then, when my career accelerated, I applied that same intensity there instead. "But life isn't meant to be lived at full throttle in only one area," Ashley said gently. "It's about balance." On an impulse, I called my boss Caroline, not expecting her to answer on Christmas Day. To my surprise, she picked up on the third ring. "Natalie, is everything okay?" Her concern was immediate as I never contacted her on holidays. Through tears, I explained my situation, the family trip, the wake-up call, my realization about my unhealthy work habits. "I had no idea things had gotten so bad," Caroline said after listening quietly. "But I'm not entirely surprised. Your work is exceptional, but the hours you've been putting in aren't sustainable or necessary." "But the Johnson account is important," "Yes," she interrupted, "but not more important than your family. Natalie, I've never actually expected you to work through holidays or stay until midnight. Those were standards you imposed on yourself." Her words hit me like a physical blow. "I thought that's what was required to succeed." "Success looks different for everyone," Caroline replied. "And from where I stand, success that costs you your family isn't success at all." As evening fell on Christmas Day, I found myself sitting in my children's rooms, touching their belongings, acutely feeling their absence. In Emma's room, I discovered university brochures hidden under her bed. She was already planning her escape years earlier than necessary. In Tyler's room, his sports trophies stood in perfect formation, his achievement certificates carefully displayed, seeking recognition I had failed to provide adequately. At their desks, I wrote each family member a letter, not emails or texts that could be ignored or skimmed, but handwritten pages that poured out my regret, my understanding, and my commitment to change. Unlike the promises I had broken before, these letters detailed specific actions. I would take acknowledgments of exactly how I had failed them and my plan for rebuilding their trust. For the first time in years, the tears I cried weren't from stress or exhaustion, but from genuine emotional processing, the beginning of healing that I should have initiated long before it came to this extreme intervention. The week between Christmas and New Year's, normally a time I would have filled with catching up on work, became instead a period of intense self-examination and concrete action. The empty house, rather than an indictment, became a blank canvas for rebuilding. My first step was scheduling an emergency session with a therapist specializing in workaholism and family dynamics. Dr. Jensen made room in her holiday schedule for what she termed an emotional crisis situation. "What you're describing is classic workaholic behavior," she confirmed, after listening to my story. "But it's important to understand that workaholism isn't really about work. It's about avoiding something else or fulfilling an unmet need." Over 3 intensive sessions that week, we began excavating the roots of my behavior, my childhood financial insecurity, my fear of failure, my mistaken equation of material provision with love. Most importantly, we addressed my use of work as an avoidance mechanism for the messier, less controllable aspects of family life. "In your office, you're in complete control," Dr. Jensen observed. "Outcomes are measurable, recognition is clear, and the rules are established. Family life is messier, success is harder to quantify, and the emotional labor is demanding in ways professional work isn't." With her guidance, I developed concrete strategies for establishing boundaries, not just vague intentions that would evaporate under pressure. She helped me craft specific language for necessary conversations with my boss and colleagues. Armed with new clarity, I requested a meeting with Caroline on December 27th. Walking into her office, I felt simultaneously terrified and resolute. "I need to make significant changes," I began without preamble. I've been offered the Philips account supervisor position, but I'm declining it. Caroline's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's a substantial promotion, Natalie. Are you sure? The position requires regular travel and weekend availability, I explained. I can't make those commitments anymore. Instead, I'd like to discuss restructuring my current role to focus on strategy rather than execution, which would allow me to maintain standard business hours. We spent 2 hours reconfiguring my position, resulting in a role that would utilize my expertise without demanding the all-consuming schedule that had devastated my family life. It included a modest pay cut, a trade-off I now understood was worth making. Your family situation has made me think about our company culture, Caroline admitted as our meeting concluded. Perhaps we need to examine how we're measuring success and the example senior leadership is setting. At home, I began the physical process of reorganization that mirrored my internal shifts. I converted our rarely used formal dining room into a family command center with a large calendar message board and dedicated space for each person's activities and schedules. I cleared my home office of unnecessary files and equipment, making room for a comfortable seating area where family members could keep me company while I worked the limited hours I planned to bring home. Each day, I exchanged brief texts with James and the children, initially awkward and formal but gradually warming as the week progressed. I didn't push for lengthy conversations or forgiveness, respecting that they needed this time apart, while also establishing that I was actively working on change rather than simply making promises. We're having Christmas dinner on the beach tonight. Read one message from Tyler accompanied by a stunning sunset photo. It looks beautiful, I replied. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. I've been thinking about your championship game. I found the video recording and watched it 3 times. Your winning goal was incredible. These small exchanges focused on them rather than my feelings or needs, slowly began rebuilding tiny bridges across the chasm I had created. With Ashley's help, I reorganized our household management to be more equitable once the family returned. I created charts outlining a fair distribution of responsibilities, recognizing how much I had burdened James with family logistics, while simultaneously micromanaging the few tasks I did handle. James has been basically running this household alone while working full-time, I acknowledged to Ashley as we finalized the new systems. No wonder he resented me. Most importantly, I blocked sacred family time in my calendar, not as flexible suggestions but as unmovable commitments. Sunday mornings became designated family breakfast time. Tuesday evenings were reserved for Tyler's sports events. Thursday afternoons were set aside for one-on-one time with Emma. These appointments would have the same inviolability I had previously given only to client meetings. I researched family counselors, creating a short list of professionals specializing in repairing fractured family dynamics. I made preliminary appointments with 3 options, allowing my family to have input on the final selection when they returned. On New Year's Eve, traditionally, a night I would have spent at the company party networking with executives, I instead sat alone in our living room, writing specific resolutions that would support my commitment to change. I created visual reminders for my office and phone. A family photo with the caption, "This is why you leave at 5:30 for my desk." A lock screen with the words, "Are you present?" or "Just present" for my constant phone companion. As midnight approached, my phone rang. James calling from Bali, where they were already celebrating the new year. "Happy New Year," he said, his voice warmer than during our Christmas call but still cautious. "Happy New Year," I replied. "How is everyone?" "Good. The kids are having a great time." He paused. "Ashley told me you've been making some real changes." "I'm trying," I said simply. "Not just promises this time. I've declined the Philips promotion, restructured my role, and started therapy." His sharp intake of breath told me he understood the significance of those actions. "That's substantial." "It's necessary," I replied. "I've been thinking about what you said about needing space to remember what it's like to have fun together." You were right. I'd forgotten too. We talked for 20 minutes, the most meaningful conversation we'd had in months. No accusations, no defensiveness, just honest communication about what each of us needed moving forward. "We have a long road ahead," James acknowledged before we ended the call. "I know," I agreed. "But I'm committed to walking it together if you'll let me." It wasn't forgiveness or resolution, but it was an opening, a tiny crack in the door that had slammed shut on Christmas Eve. As the new year arrived, I allowed myself to feel cautious hope that the painful lesson of my empty house might ultimately save rather than destroy the family I loved. The anticipation of their return on January 2nd left me physically ill with nerves. I had cleaned the house, thoroughly prepared their favorite meals, and arranged everything to welcome them home, while trying not to create expectations that would pressure them. When their taxi pulled into the driveway, I resisted the urge to rush outside. Instead, I waited in the living room, giving them space to enter on their terms. The front door opened, and I heard the familiar sounds of my family: Tyler's sneakers being kicked off, Emma's voice asking about something in the kitchen, James's deeper tone responding. When they entered the living room, the atmosphere immediately tensed. Emma and Tyler stood partially behind James, uncertain and protective. All three were deeply tanned, looking refreshed, despite the long journey home, but wary as they regarded me. "Welcome home," I said simply, my voice thick with emotion. Tyler broke the standoff, first stepping forward to give me a quick, awkward hug before retreating. Emma offered a tight smile but maintained her distance. James nodded acknowledgement, then suggested the kids unpack while we talked. Once alone, the conversation was difficult but necessary. We sat at opposite ends of the sofa, the physical distance mirroring the emotional gulf between us. "I understand why you felt you needed to take such drastic action," I began, determined not to become defensive. "I've spent this time really looking at how I've been living and what I've prioritized. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I know I need to earn back your trust through consistent action, not just words." James studied me carefully. "This isn't the first time we've had this conversation, Natalie." I know, I acknowledged. "But it's the first time I've made concrete changes before you returned, instead of just promises. I've already restructured my job, started therapy, and created systems for better family functioning. I'm not asking you to believe me, I'm asking for the chance to show you." Later that evening, we gathered for our first family meeting. Seated around the kitchen table, each person had the opportunity to express their feelings without interruption or defense. The honesty was painful but necessary. "I stopped telling you about my science projects because you always looked stressed when I talked about school," Emma revealed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "It was easier to just talk to Dad instead." "I felt like your laptop was more important than me," Tyler said quietly. "Like you were always there but never really there." James shared how he had felt increasingly like a single parent, while still trying to protect my relationship with the children. "I made excuses for you until I couldn't anymore. I told them you loved them even when your actions suggested work came first. When my turn came, I didn't offer defenses or explanations, just acknowledgement of how my behavior had affected each of them specifically, with a clear outline of the changes I had already implemented and those still to come. I've scheduled us for family counseling," I concluded. "I found 3 options, and I'd like us to decide together which one feels right for all of us." The fact that I'd already taken concrete action rather than just making promises seemed to make an impression. Though still guarded, they agreed to attend counseling, and James expressed cautious approval of the household systems I had developed in their absence. Those first weeks after their return were profoundly challenging. The children remained skeptical of my sudden availability, often testing boundaries to see if I would revert to old patterns when stressed. Emma was particularly resistant, having been hurt the most deeply by my emotional abandonment during her crucial early teenage years. "How do I know you won't just go back to being work-obsessed mom in a month?" she demanded during a particularly tense dinner 3 weeks after their return. "You don't," I admitted honestly. "You can only judge by what you see day after day. I'm asking you to watch my actions, not listen to my words." Small moments gradually began rebuilding connections. When Tyler's history teacher emailed about his struggling grade, I immediately rearranged my schedule to help him study rather than simply telling him to work harder. Emma's surprise when I remembered details about her friend's drama information I would previously have tuned out, slowly transformed into an expectation that I would indeed be paying attention. Most significant was the day my phone rang during family movie night with an urgent client call. Everyone froze, watching to see what I would do. I silenced the ringer, sent a brief text that I would address the issue during business hours the next day, and returned my attention to the film without comment. The collective exhale in the room was audible. 3 months after their return, signs of healing became more evident. Our weekly family dinners evolved from stilted, careful conversations to genuine sharing and occasional laughter. I began leaving work precisely at 5, maintaining the boundary despite my boss's occasional attempts to extend meetings. Weekend activities became sacred time planned and attended by all family members. 6 months later, the transformation was substantial. My restructured position at work provided adequate income with reasonable hours, allowing me to be fully present for evening activities and weekend events. James and I had reestablished our partnership, sharing household management equitably, and rediscovering the connection that had initially brought us together. Most telling was the family vacation we planned together for spring break, a modest trip to the mountains rather than an exotic destination, but one we all helped arrange and genuinely enjoyed together. The photos from that trip showed a reconnected family with me, fully present in both body and mind for the first time in years. In our final family counseling session, before transitioning to monthly check-ins, Dr. Montgomery asked each of us to reflect on what we had learned through this difficult journey. "I learned that sometimes you have to do something dramatic to create change," James said. "It was a terrible decision to make, but I don't regret giving our family the wake-up call we needed." "I learned that people can actually change if they really want to," Emma offered, reaching for my hand across the couch, "and that it's okay to ask for what you need instead of just giving up on someone." "I learned that my family is stronger than I thought," Tyler added. "We got through the hard stuff together. When my turn came, I took a deep breath. I learned that success means nothing if you lose the people you're supposedly succeeding for." The empty house on Christmas Eve wasn't the end of our story, it was the beginning of a better one. The painful intervention my family had staged, leaving me alone on Christmas Eve, had indeed been extreme, even cruel in some ways. Yet I had come to recognize it as the shock I needed to save what truly mattered. The temporary loss of my family had prevented their permanent departure. The empty house had created space for me to finally see what had been gradually emptying from my life for years. As we continue rebuilding, I remain vigilant against the workaholic tendencies that nearly cost me everything. The balance requires constant attention and occasional course correction, but the reward, a genuinely connected family life, provides motivation that no professional achievement ever could. Sometimes the people who love us most know exactly what we need, even when it breaks our hearts temporarily. What matters isn't the perfect family portrait we present to the world, but the messy, authentic love that fills our home when no one else is watching. Have you ever experienced a wake-up call that changed your life? Leave a comment below sharing your story. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life journeys and lessons, and hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Thank you for joining me on this painful but ultimately hopeful journey. Remember, it's never too late to change your priorities and reclaim what matters most.